Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Everyman's Thoughts. In today's video, we're going to break down Season 1, Episode 7 of The Wheel of Time. There will be serious spoilers for Episode 7, so if you haven't seen the show yet, please consider hitting the subscribe button and coming back later. With that, you've been warned, so let's get started. As the episode opens, we see an Aiel spear maiden running to an isolated corner of what appears to be a much larger battlefield. This is the Blood Snow. It's the last battle of the war, and unfortunately for our spear maiden, it's the last day of her life. When she goes to give birth, the last warrior she sees is Tam al'Thor, Rand's surrogate father, giving us a strong implication that the baby is Rand himself. In the books, at the Battle of Edmund's Field, Tam is seriously injured, and during a fever, he tries to explain to Rand who his real mother is, or at least he references her. Because that scene wasn't included in the first episode of the TV series, we were sort of deprived of that mystery. Either way, we now know that Rand is an Aielman, and there's much more to his backstory than what we know. Overall, I thought the scene was pretty well put together, particularly for television. In fact, if I had a complaint, I would say it was overdone. All of the Matrix moves and flying through the air distracted from the pregnancy, which was the most important plot point. However, I'm also glad they did right by the Spear Maidens. They are well-trained, tough warriors and deserve to be treated with respect. As the episode continues, we arrive where we left off last week with the gang in the Ways. In case you missed it, in my previous video, I mentioned that this was the point of filming where the actor who plays Matt suddenly decided to leave the series. Despite having to scramble, I think the authors did a pretty good job of dealing with the issue of Matt's unexpected absence, particularly in the area of how the individual other characters reacted in relation to how those characters have been developed so far. As they travel through the Ways, they begin to realize something is wrong. One of the guiding stones is defaced, they are attacked by a Trolloc, and Lan has a strong sense that they are being followed. Sure enough, we see a flash of lightning that illuminates a previously darkened area, and we see a man ominously standing there staring at them. About the time they begin to realize that the Trollocs are now using the Ways to move secretly, a Trolloc attacks and Rand unwittingly uses his powers. And, of course, the use of the one power in the Ways summons the Black Wind, which is a force of, let's just say it's a force of pure malevolence, which begins to just mess with your head. As the Black Wind begins to do its thing, eventually Nynaeve has had enough. True to her character, Nynaeve's strong protective instinct fuels an incredible display of power as she keeps the wind at bay. This allows Moiraine enough time to use her power to open up another waygate and allow the group to escape. Although I thought the set piece they used looked cheap, very Saturday afternoon television, the scene overall was pretty well done. However, I think they also missed an opportunity. As the wind was whispering to them, sort of playing on their fears or emotions, this could have been an opportunity to expand our insight into the characters, maybe even provided a little more foreshadowing. Instead, it hit on plot points we already had or general fears that didn't expand the characters at all. A few things about the scene that I think are worth talking about. It appears there's been a full, let's call it reconciliation between Rand and Egwene as they've come to terms with what their future might look like together. Second, the relationship between Nynaeve and Lan is coming out of the dark. There were hints earlier, of course, but often you'd have to read into it, but now it's just obvious for anybody who has a pair of eyes. And we get some more suggestion that Perrin is indeed jealous of the relationship, between Rand and Egwene. Now we're on to Faldara, and again, a wonderful set location. Just the look, the feel, the costumes, everything was fantastic. For me, set locations have been the single most consistent strength of the show, and Faldara contributes to that significantly. I want to skip ahead to the Seer in the bar because that allows us to have some fun analysis. As Moiraine goes to speak to the Seer, you see all of the children are distracted by the beer and the companionship, but not Nynaeve. Nynaeve keeps a suspicious eye on Moiraine. You gotta love Nynaeve. So what did the Seer actually say? For Perrin, she mentioned the yellow eyes and the blood on the chin, but that's really nothing new. We already knew about his connection to the wolves. For Rand, though, she says she sees him with a baby, yet a little later in the episode, she tells him he won't survive the Eye of the World. Assuming that child is his, these two would seem to be mutually exclusive unless there's some serious timeline issues coming our way. Then, when the seer references the ladies, she says a white flame and a ring of gold. If you've read the books, that's some pretty obvious foreshadowing there, but that's an unnecessarily spoiler, so I'm not going to mention it here. Maybe the most interesting fortune she had, though, was for Moiraine. The Amelin seat will be your downfall. I could think of two possible interpretations for this. Remember that the current Amelin seat is Moiraine's friend Swan Sanchez, but Swan is politically weak. Thus, it's entirely possible we could get a new Amelin seat. However, remember, Moiraine swore an oath to Swan, not the Amelin seat, so if Swan was replaced, those two things could be working at cross purposes, particularly if Liandrin takes power. The second interpretation involves Swan's dreams. If you recall, Swan had visions of the Dark One being weak, which is why Moiraine immediately departed for the Eye of the World in the first place. If Swan's visions were wrong and bleep hits the fan, that could easily be Moraine's downfall as well. The scene after the bar where they have the meeting and eventually an argument typifies everything that just frustrates me about this show. There's so much good work being ruined by bad work at the core that I just can't ignore it. For instance, Madeline Madison is the actress that plays Egwene, and in this scene she shined. It was her best work of the series in my opinion. When Egwene and Rand are arguing about Matt and Egwene turns around with her hands on her hip and throws him that look, that was brilliant. Anybody who's ever dated a woman knows exactly what she's saying right there, and more importantly, you better pick your next words very carefully. Later, Madeline Madden does it again when she throws Nynaeve the hand as she walks away in frustration. Then there was the confrontation between Perrin and Rand. Two guys go to the bar, have some drinks, and then fight over the only girl that's available to them. I'm shocked. All in all, this should have been a great scene, but at its core, the argument they had is the problem. At the start of the scene, Moiraine is asked about who the Seer is, and she blatantly lies. As usual, Nynaeve calls her out on her lies, and Moiraine proceeds to make some grandiose speech about how she can't lie. Her words ring hollow and cheap, but nobody calls her out on it. Once again, they just let it slide. We never get that second layer of confrontation that would naturally happen, and they consistently allow Moiraine off the hook. Then, Moiraine essentially admits she was lying by immediately changing her story about who the Seer was. To make matters worse, she then turns around and says, whoever's not the Dragon-Reborn is not going to survive. Yet, that's the exact question they asked her in the final scene of episode 6, and again, at that time she was deceitful. Somehow, though, nobody has a problem that she could have told them that before they stepped through the Waygate. Before they made their decision, before they left Matt behind. I want to say this, I absolutely respect, even applaud their decision not to morph Moiraine into a straight-line good guy. That would have been the easy, obvious choice. However, if your main character is going to have some shade to her, other characters need to respond to that in a realistic fashion. Otherwise, why am I emotionally investing in these other characters when they're essentially NPCs? Speaking of Moiraine being a little shady, she showed some of her true colors when she sent the red Aja after Matt. She knows how brutal they are. Also, in Moraine's meeting with Lan after the confrontation, there was the strong implication that they were simply manipulating the children and would force them to go if they wouldn't go willingly. Okay guys, this video's running a little long, so I'm just going to hit the high points of a few things before I get to the last thing I really want to talk about. Nynaeve spends the evening having dinner with people that are close to Lan. They are at this point essentially family. It's during this dinner that she perceives that Lan's value system is in line with her own, and so she decides to take their relationship to the next level. Moving on to Rand and Egwene, despite having a fight earlier, as I mentioned, they have truly reconciled in their hearts and can conceive of a future together. And as long as that's the case, this relationship is going to hold and they get back together. Okay, so it's at this point that Rand is laying in bed and begins to reflect and put some of the puzzle pieces together. He remembers breaking down the ironwood door. He remembers it was him that channeled, not Egwene in the ways. It was the voice in the ways telling him he was the Dragon-Reborn. Rand now has many pieces of the puzzle, but he doesn't know what picture it makes, so he goes to the one place where he can get clarification, and that's Min the Seer. With Min filling in his backstory, Rand now understands two things. He's the Dragon-Reborn, and according to her, he's not going to survive the Eye of the World. This leads to a knock on Moraine's door, and as she opens, we get the big reveal that Rand is the Dragonborn. To their credit, Rand and Moraine understand that no one else needs to suffer, so they sneak out in the early morning hours to the Blighted Land and leave the rest of the group behind. I want to circle back to that reveal for a moment when we find out Rand is the Dragonborn and just how underwhelming that scene was. If you've seen my previous videos, you know I've spoken extensively about how much buildup there has been around the mystery of who is the Dragon-Reborn. The repeated misdirections or false implications, some of the wordplay, and perhaps most damningly the underdevelopment of Rand as a character. I don't know if all of this was done simply to feed the mystery or if they had other agendas involved. What I do know is that reveal didn't pay off the debt of what we lost to get here. I'm also still very concerned that Rand is going to be the Dragon-Reborn in name only, and they're going to bleed off some of his powers or accomplishments to other characters. The final episode of Season 1 is this week, and that will probably go a long way into telling us how Rand is going to be treated throughout the rest of the series. Well, guys, that's it for me. Please consider hitting that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.